My rabbit food.
All right, well, everybody, welcome back. I'm Deepa Olapli, the Associate Director of the Seeker Center. And I think we've gotten off to a rousing start with the first panel. And hopefully you're fueled up even more after the lunch. And I know some of you have not finished, but please go ahead and carry on while we start the panel here. This morning we heard about an emerging topic, the new social media and some of the things that we really don't understand. So I learned a lot, speaking for myself on that. Now I'm very happy to turn to our second panel, which is looking at the economic and business and trade relations between Taiwan and the United States, really how to strengthen that relationship. A slightly older topic, but an enduring one and a very important one, particularly with the Trump administration, where the onus, I think, often falls on some of the other countries to prove why they're such economically attractive to the United States. So, and Taiwan is one of these countries that, like everyone else, has to do that. We've got two terrific panelists to lead us through these discussions, and I'll just introduce both of them and then turn it over to them. We'll start with Riley Walters, who comes to us from the Heritage Foundation, and he's a policy analyst there. He focuses on Northeast Asia and political economy, and as I was we were talking that, you know, most analysts in Washington focus on the security and military aspects of the region, but so it's wonderful to have someone here who actually knows the deeper elements of the economics, which I think we don't do enough of. He has been writing quite a bit recently on this specific topic, which is why I really wanted to have him here. He, before joining Heritage Foundation, he was a Penn Temple Fellow with the National Endowment for Democracy. He has also held the George C. Marshall Fellowship with the Heritage Foundation. So joining him, and he'll start us off, and joining him is Rupert Hammond Chambers, who probably doesn't need too much introduction to this group. We're welcoming him back for an event here. He is the president of the Taiwan-US Business Council, and he has been in that position as president since 2000. I guess there's no term limit as long as he's doing such an outstanding job, right?
It's a good job.
He's also the managing director on Taiwan for the Bauer Group Asia. And he has been focused on really designing ways in which companies can strategize to do more business in Taiwan-US interactions. And so with that, I will turn it over to Riley to start us off, and then we'll turn to Rupert after that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the introduction. There we go. Yeah, thank you for the introduction. All right, so when we look at the U.S.-Asia economic relationship these days, this week, last week, there are a lot of moving pieces, and so things tend to be sort of lost in the noise. Obviously, when we're talking about U.S.-Asia economic relations, the biggest piece of this is the ongoing U.S.-China trade dispute. You know, it seems like almost every month there's some new speculation over what the Trump administration's strategy is for sort of reconfiguring the U.S.-China relationship, whether there's some new sort of grand strategy that is an amalgamation of trade and security. People are unsure of the restrictions that might be placed on bilateral trade and investment, to what degree and for how long. And you know, we see a lot of this uncertainty in the markets and currency volatility over the past several months. Right now, the U.S. and China have entered the early stages of this 90-day period for negotiations toward ending the trade dispute, by the end of which we'll have some sort of deal to remove some of the bilateral tariffs on both sides, and you know, to sort of come to an agreement to amend what the Trump administration has seen as years of unfair trade and just unfair practices, mostly on the China side, obviously. It's unrealistic to expect, though, that with now less than 80 days, that anything of significance, something that will completely revolutionize the Chinese economy away from its state-driven economy, is possible. But you know, as USTR Lighthizer alluded to on Sunday, you know, one thing that they will accept to a certain degree is even just a promise to reform. So you know, there is steps in the right direction in the U.S.-China relationship, but you know, it's unrealistic for the U.S. to continue to pursue unilateral trade action against China and expect as robust reform of China as it could achieve without our international partners. You know, obviously, the U.S. shouldn't be solely focused on reforming China's economy, and the role its government has in its economy. You know, the Indo-Pacific strategy of the Trump administration is more than just, you know, it's not necessarily a China containment initiative. Trade and economics is a huge part of this free and Indo-Pacific strategy, and this is where partners like Taiwan and the relationship with Taiwan play an important role. Like most countries in the region, though, Taiwan has become more economically dependent on China, trade with China, investment in China, arguably more than some, in fact. Almost 25% of China's total trade is with China. And it doesn't help that Taiwan, again, like most other developed countries, is starved for growth. You know, looking for something more than just 2% plus GDP growth next year. You know, the relationship that Taiwan has with China obviously isn't the same that the U.S. has with China, that the U.S. has with other countries like Japan, or you know, China has with Japan. Slowly but surely, Beijing has, I'm sure they've talked about this in previous panels, and as most of you know, Beijing has aspirations of bringing sort of Taiwan back under its arm. And slowly but surely, Beijing is trying to make it harder for Taiwanese to actually engage in economic activity with third parties, while at the same time attempting to win the hearts and minds of Taiwanese businesses and individuals. So, you know, over the last couple of years, we've seen the effects of China's economic leverage, both of private companies and countries alike. I don't think anything stands out more, though, than the effect that it has had on intergovernmental relations. Taiwan has been left out of some significant trade deals, at least, you know, to a large degree in the Asia Pacific, and you know, all signs tend to point to China on this. The TPP, or new TPP, Comprehensive Progressive Agreement of Trans-Pacific Partnership, blah, 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 you know, will go into effect by the end of this month. Taiwan, while it wants to be a part of it, is not a part of it. The RCEP, or Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, which RCEP partners want to agree to by the end of next year. Again, Taiwan wants to be a part of, but is not necessarily. You know, for TPP, it's countries don't want to promote Taiwan's ascension and anger Beijing. Meanwhile, Beijing, though it's a significant member of RCEP, isn't necessarily backing Taiwan's ascension into it either, and into the RCEP. Bilaterally, Taiwan and China do have a trade agreement. However, you know, rightly questioning Beijing's true intent when this deal was signed almost 8 years ago. Concerns about the sustainability, transparency, and of course a breakdown in contact between the two sides meant that this deal never went into full effect. Instead, Beijing has shifted over the past several years, not just with Taiwan, obviously, but other countries. We can go into that maybe more in Q&A. But Beijing itself and provincial governments too are now pursuing new initiatives to sort of incentivize Taiwanese people and investment in businesses in mainland China to sort of spread this bilateral leverage, growth and leverage. Not too long ago, the Taiwan Affairs Office of China State Council initiated a program commonly referred to as the 31 Initiatives. On the surface, these measures range from encouraging economic cooperation, social cohesion, measures to increase investment and give benefits to families who wish to work in China. For example, Taiwan-funded enterprises are granted land use in the same way as mainland enterprises. Taiwanese citizens are also eligible for various cultural awards. And many of the local provinces have also initiated similar initiatives, measures similar to what the state has directed. Fujian province, Jiangxi, Shandong, they all have similar measures to incentivize Taiwanese investment in those specific areas. Many more, some of them a little bit more expansive. The Taiwan Affairs Office is 31 measures, Fujian is 60 measures, but they're all similar to a degree. Given Taiwan's place as a leading manufacturer, such as in the production of semiconductors, many of the measures, specifically at the beginning itself of these measures, the main focus has been Made in China 2025. Despite the news that you might have read this morning, or tweets that you might believe in whether China will continue to pursue its Made in China 2025 initiative, I still believe that Beijing wants to become the world's leader in developing advanced manufacturing technologies. And again, it's why Beijing's these 31 measures continue to have Made in China 2025 as the top of the list when it comes to sort of incentivizing Taiwanese investment. Just because maybe we'll see next year if China reforms its Made in China 2025, that doesn't necessarily mean it'll necessarily have ripple effects down to these other measures which already do take China 2025 into the mix. So that's sort of the Taiwan-China economic relationship. But what about the U.S.-Taiwan relationship? One thing, if you're not familiar, Heritage has been very supportive of the U.S.-Taiwan relationship, and hopefully I can continue this today as we have for the past 30 years. In 2017, Taiwan was our largest trading partner, $87 billion worth of cross-border trade in services and goods, over $1 billion in cross-border investment. In 2016, U.S. companies made over $4.5 billion in IP revenue licensing in Taiwan. According to some numbers, Taiwan investment makes up more than 322,000 American jobs, and that's just if we're looking at exports. This doesn't include the jobs that are supported through imports. When we look at economic relationships, one thing that the Heritage Foundation has always been advocating for is economic freedom. Countries that tend to have greater economic freedom tend to have greater economic prosperity. Taiwan is actually more economically free than the United States by our measures. If we rank the countries, 0 being not free, I think North Korea is the lowest at 5, and we rank 100 as the most free. No country is most free at 100%. I think the highest is Hong Kong. Taiwan ranks 13th with a 76.6. The United States ranks 18th with a 75.7. The numbers, the aggregate numbers, the 75 and the 76, while those are short, it's still enough that several countries can squeeze in between. We can go into this a little bit more in Q&A as well, but I encourage you to go on our website, look up our Index of Economic Freedom. So I want to plug that. When it comes to deals that the United States and Taiwan has, we do have a trade deal of sorts. It's our trade and investment framework agreement that we have with Taiwan that we've had for over 15 years now. But we haven't had a meeting of this in the past 2 years, not since October 2016. We're probably not going to have one before the end of this year. This is worrisome, especially for for people who look at the broader U.S.-Taiwan relationship going forward. Certainly, there are a lot of outstanding issues that folks from the USTR like to bring up regarding beef and pork imports. This has been a common theme, though, for many a number of years. So, one thing that we would like to pursue, or at least what the Heritage Foundation has been talking about doing, is advocating for something a little bit more with the U.S.-Taiwan relationship. What we would like to see is a high-level economic dialogue with Taiwan. This is similar to what the U.S. and Japan have had, talking about sectoral reform. Trade investment is an aspect of that. Certainly talking about the beef and pork import restrictions, but also the U.S. tariffs on steel and aluminum. These are things that could be focused on the onset, but really it should be more about cooperation going forward. Areas for cooperation, areas for development, digital economy in Southeast Asia as a part of Taiwan's southbound policy, new southbound policy, and of course within the Indo-Pacific strategy and framework. These are areas for benefit. What it would look like is USTR, co-led by USTR and Commerce. The added benefit of this, of course, is the high level that it would bring to the U.S.-Taiwan relationship at a secretarial level, which would be historical, to say the least. Obviously, there are some hurdles with this. I say obviously, but USTR, folks within the USTR do have this sort of institutional barrier to, as I mentioned, continue with the TIFA talks, the Trade and Investment Framework Agreement, sorry, TIFA, which, as well as expanding beyond anything beyond that. You also have a U.S. trade representative who, again, at least for the next 80 days, and definitely more, is going to be busy negotiating new trade deals with a Congress, specifically a House that is no longer necessarily aligned with the party of the president. So Robert Lighthizer is going to have a very busy next year, and adding more to this makes it difficult, but that doesn't make it any less important at the least. Secretary of Commerce can have a role in this bilateral or co-led agreement. So, going forward, I think it's important that both the United States and Taiwan continue to pursue economic freedom, as at least we like to grade it. These are rule of law, government size, monetary freedom, fiscal freedom, trade freedoms, things like that. It doesn't always necessarily have to be on a bilateral basis. We both move in agreements, though we would like to see a free trade agreement with Taiwan. This is something that's 30 years overdue. But unilateral action too can sort of help diverge some of the threats that we see growing from China's economic leverage, even though I think there will be some trade-offs in the near future between the leverage it has and the weakening of its economy. But also that other economies, other governments will want to play a role in sort of integrating both U.S. and Taiwan sort of economic development in the region. And with that, I'm stop.
Thank you so much, Ryan, for giving a broad overview of the current trends in U.S.-Taiwan economic relations, and also giving us some pathways that we can move forward on. And now let me turn to Rupert, who I asked Rupert to perhaps drill down a little bit more from his perch at the U.S.-Taiwan Business Council to look at the business interactions, and he'll be touching a bit on the digital economy, which might be harking back to this morning's panel. So Rupert?
I would like to, excuse me, echo Riley's shameless plug for the Index for Economic Freedom. It's an extraordinary publication. It's really unique, and if you haven't seen it, I would really recommend. You're here, so you have an active interest in the subject matter. You should check it out. It's a really unique piece of work, and it's extremely useful. I use my copies all the time. It's great in the moment, as well as having back copies to use as a resource. So anyway, I would concur with that. But thank you, Deepa, Richard, the Seeger Center, for your willingness to host today's event. I wonder what Gaston Seeger would make of all of what's going on with China at the moment. He would certainly be well equipped, in my view, to offer counsel to any president sitting in the White House at this juncture, given his expertise and the strength of the team that he worked with, Jim Lilly and David Lotz and Wolfowitz and Armitage and others, who made up the core of George Shultz's Asia team. I believe that Gaston Seeger would certainly be a leader in promoting the interests of the United States in this present situation if he were alive today. I would like to just indulge for a second here. Over the past weekend, we lost a really great thinker and leader in US-Taiwan, or in Taiwan's economic past. Zhang Pingong, or PK Zhang, was instrumental in the 1980s and 90s in Taiwan's economic miracle, 6% plus growth year on year. PK, to those of us who had the privilege of knowing him, was an economic central planner, not in the Trotsky sense of it, but he played an extraordinary role in leadership, along with people like Xu Lida and Wang Zhigang, and of course Vincent Xiao, over that period in charting Taiwan's economic miracle over 20 years. And his passing was a great loss. He did a tremendous job for his country, and he was a very good friend of the United States. So rest in peace, PK. We've touched on. I'm going to try and fold into some of the activities that the U.S. business community participated in respect to some of the things that Riley has mentioned and Deepa pointed to as well. U.S.-Taiwan trade policy is honestly like being Bill Murray in Groundhog Day. It just seems like we've been stuck in the same day for years. We have been stuck in the same day for years. It is incredibly frustrating that we have failed today to elevate the relationship out of parochial differences and looked at it more through the prism of the strategic interests of both countries, which, by the way, are embedded in the Taiwan Relations Act. Our USTR's focus on agricultural issues, even if we accept on the face of it that they stand on solid ground, it's the position of the U.S.-Taiwan Business Council that they are now pursuing a failed strategy, that we've been at this for a decade, and that their approach has manifestly failed. So how do you satisfy the requirement to change the agricultural policies of Taiwan that allow for U.S. produce based on science to flow into the Taiwan market, solve that issue, and as a consequence then broaden out the potential for a far broader and robust conversation? For our membership, we want to see that happen in the worst way. Our membership is a broad cross-section of the U.S. economy and U.S. economic engagement. Our membership is heavily vested in the supply chain, so a lot of tech, both principals, systems integrators, as well as supply chain companies. And those companies want to see Taiwan grow. They want to see the supply chain operate smoothly. And they also want to ensure that they can operate within the Taiwan market, which as a market unto itself is also significant, right? Taiwan is one of the world's largest economies, a top 20 economy. It's a top 10 trading partner with the United States, and that belies its significance in the supply chain. Access to the Taiwan market is essential, and these parochial matters are getting in the way of opening up sectors like financial services, where I believe US companies could thrive. The key players on either side, on the Taiwan side, the trade and economic leadership team, with trade as the sort of leader here, is President Tsai herself. She is, of course, a trade negotiator, first and foremost. Minister with that portfolio, John Dung. Some of you know, I'm looking around the room, know John personally. Vice Minister for Economic Affairs, Wang Meihua. And then underneath Meihua is of course, the DG for the Bureau of Foreign Trade, Jenny Yang. Those four people make up the core of Taiwan's economic team, and frankly, they are world-class trade negotiators. I'm not just saying that because I'm fond of them personally. They are expert at what they do. But it's a bit like having the, to use a sports metaphor, it's a bit like, the Barcelona Olympics and having, the US World Cup team there with Michael Jordan and Charles Barkley and all those guys and not letting them play, right? What's the point in having them there if you don't let them play? Taiwan could be a significant player in global, bilateral, multilateral trade engagement if it were given an opportunity to do. It could be a leader if countries were prepared to see the opportunity inherent in engaging Taiwan in trade liberalization. And of course, separate of the challenge that Taiwan faces in engaging, look what Taiwan's doing anyway. They are a leader. Think what they could do if they were given an opportunity to lead in some of these economic opportunities. On the US side, excuse me, the US side, the trade relationship has almost zero senior leadership. Instead, it is driven primarily by working level officials at USTR State and AIT. Good people, all good people. However, in the absence of senior political capital to invest in the relationship, they don't have the opportunity to argue at a strategic level. Well, or to make a case for more, and frankly, it's not their job to argue the strategic importance of the economic engagement. That is the job of people further up the decision-making chain. So we're stuck here until, in my view, we get leadership. And I do believe it's possible with Mr. Trump and his colleagues. We really have a unique opportunity. Mr. Bolton, Mr. Pompeo, to name but two outside of the traditional defense, and potentially Stilwell when he finally gets in at EAP. These personalities could play an important role in moving us beyond this position that we have, and they will have robust support from the organization that I represent. And I don't want to put words in Bill Foreman and AmCham Taipei's camp, but Bill and his colleagues who do excellent work, they too have been outspoken in their interest in seeing a free/fair trade agreement. On the private sector side, the tech supply chain is driving the relationship. Our main technology companies continue to rely heavily on Taiwan, with Taiwan companies doing much of the systems integration in China. You all know that. I think you guys are aware of what's happening within the supply chain and the critical role that companies like Honhai play in integrating Apple products in China. Integrating, right? Honhai doesn't make all those products. They integrate all the different pieces that go into our phones and our iPads and all the goodies that we buy at Christmas and Hanukkah and those sorts of times. But nevertheless, Taiwan is a key player in that. That, of course, is the shift in the supply chain as we see it right now is accelerating. It started prior to Mr. Trump, frankly, with the rising in costs on the eastern side of China and along the eastern seaboards. Costs started to rise. Companies started to move inland more in China, and you also started to see a stronger break towards Southeast Asia. Vietnam is an excellent example here. But the geostrategic tensions that have arisen since President Trump responded, in my view, I absolutely reject the notion that this is Trump's trade war. That's nonsense in my view. It's not Trump's trade war. We have been attacked, in my view. The predatory practices of the PRC required a response. And if Mrs. Clinton or Mr. Trump had won, Mrs. Clinton won, I still believe at some level we would be dealing at this moment with that predatory behavior. So we have a government at the moment here in the United States that is attempting to address that. I worry about Riley's comment a wee bit that he thinks things will be sorted out in 90 days. I hope not.
because I don't believe that that will mean, if we accept what China puts forward in 90 days, I think we're going to end up with a very poor deal. Because I do agree with Riley when he says that the structural issues that we're dealing with in China aren't going to be fixed in 90 days. This is far more systemic than that. And frankly, I'm highly suspicious of banner Chinese headlines about how much of this they're going to buy and what they're going to do over here. And 2 or 3 years later, we find it's pennies in the dollar. So I think we're in it for the long haul here. And I actually believe that Mr. Trump's colleagues recognize that this is a heavy lift, and we're going to be at it for a while. Because the most important thing for the national security interests of the United States, that is inclusive of its economy and the companies within that economy, many of whom are members of the US Taiwan Business Council, is that their intellectual property, their trade secrets, their ability to operate in the supply chain and have their critical technologies protected is essential. It represents an existential threat to their very existence. So I think we sort of worked through that a bit. We are seeing some shift in the supply chain. I'm not going to do your homework for you if you are, so please don't ask me what the data is on to give you all the specifics. You can see it right here in MOEA's release data, the Ministry of Economic Affairs release data every month. But what we've seen basically is a shift in about 30 cents of every dollar away from China into Southeast Asia over the last 2 years for tracked investment, Taiwan tracked investment. And in essence, the analysis certainly that we have in-house is that what's happening is you've got about 35 to 40 cents in the dollar still going into China, and what we attribute that to is constructed concrete facilities that are already there that require new equipment, maybe a new building or two, but it's already established boots on the ground. The next 30 to 35 that was used to be flowing into China is now shifting away. That money might normally be expected to go further west or to some new facility. Now it's going out of China. Now these Taiwan supply chain companies, they're looking at Vietnam, Indonesia, Malaysia, India. That's where these guys are going. That part of the money is now shifting. So overall, you've got a shift where the majority of the money was flowing into China, let's say 65 to 70 cents in the dollar. Now it's 65 to 70 cents of the dollar flowing to somewhere else, right? And 35 to 40 cents of the dollar, or let's say a third of a dollar still flowing into China. So a significant change. Again, I want to be clear, attributing it to 2 things. One, the rising cost for manufacturing in China as a function of the fact that it's getting more expensive to make things there. And 2, the geostrategic risk and the direction that the overall relationship between the US and China, and indeed the rest of the world and China, is heading, and the interest on the part of supply chain companies to shift and to balance that risk out a wee bit more than it has been. Can I speak for a couple more minutes?
Yes,
Is that all right?
yeah.
The IC industry, of course, dominates Taiwan's geopolitical and economic leadership. Taiwan's semiconductor is a monster, and it will continue to be. It is run as well as any company in the world. I'll never tire of saying that. Morris Chang did an essential service to the fortunes and future of Taiwan, political fortunes and future, by building that company, because it makes it an essential partner to the United States, given our reliance on IC production out of Taiwan for our own critical industries here in the United States. TSMC is right at the heart of that. A very good book that was actually written by a guy who worked for the Semiconductor Equipment Manufacturing Association called Silicon Shield. It came out about 25 years ago. I actually just reordered a copy since mine went walkabout. But it stands the test of time. And what it really gets to at its heart is America's reliance on Taiwan as a semiconductor manufacturer of critical chips for American products. Makes it an essential strategic partner. It's not fully understood, regrettably. We're starting to try and wrap our arms around it. It would be a tragedy if we had a blockade or some sort of military confrontation in the Taiwan Strait, the supply chain got cut, and we really came to understand how quickly our manufacturing lines would come to a halt if Taiwan was cut off from the supply chain. Look at how quickly ZTE came crashing down when it couldn't get hold of its chips. It was days days. That's how well these inventories are managed. And ZTE is obviously a Chinese example, but these things work both ways, as I'm sure you're all aware. Apple, Intel, Microsoft, Google, Qualcomm, Micron, Corning, all these US tech companies, as a matter of public record, are hugely vested in Taiwan from a research and development and an entrepreneurial standpoint. Apple obviously is a branded product you can buy, but you've also got critical suppliers like Corning. They make the glass. Corning makes this glass. It's called Gorilla Glass, right? Absolute leader, right? A lot of money to be made. They're all there. They're doing their work in cooperation with Taiwan. So let's pivot a wee bit and just touch on what Deepa had asked. Taiwan's digital future. What is Taiwan trying to do on the digital side? Taiwan's Digital Nation and Innovation Economic Development Program, say that 5 times fast, running from 2017 to 2025 is well underway. It's a Tsai DPP government initiative. It's rather, it's a bit more usefully known as Digi Plus, so I'll use that idea. It's designed to catalyze Taiwan's evolution into a network nation with all of the commercial and personal transformation that implies. The goal for DigiPlus is to bring Taiwan economic activity in the digital economy to 200 billion plus by 2025, while increasing the broadband penetration to over 80% for digital lifestyle services and increasing speeds beyond 2 gigabytes, so over 90% of the country. So it's ambitious. It certainly is ambitious. How's it going to get there? Well, it's going to require a dual-headed approach. Obviously legislation from the Li-Fa UN, and we saw some proactive movement, positive proactive movement in this past year from the LY, with the Financial Technology Development and Innovation Experimentation Act, again, say that 5 times fast, and the Act for the Recruitment and Employment of Foreign Professionals. One, fintech. Taiwan could do an excellent job in fintech, and 2, it's critical but highly politicized issue of managed immigration, right? To positively impact the pool of employees that Taiwan has. Taiwan has frankly, it's an existential threat. Its demographic situation, the growth in people is just not significant enough. Immigration could be an important part of that if it's appropriately managed. And of course, immigration has an important impact. It's quantifiable on entrepreneurialism, the construction of new businesses. Again, if you get those policies right, you can create Google, you can create other, obviously Google's a massive example, but I think you get the point that I'm making. Immigration, again, managed immigration is an important, positive role player in a country's present and future economic environment. AIT, the American Institute of Taiwan, and the National Development Council have been doing an excellent job too in cooperating on the digital economy. The US's Global Cities Team Challenge has also had an impact on Taiwan's digital landscape by pushing to create a single platform for entrepreneurs, for technology firms and local governments to develop smart city solutions for tougher municipal problems. Taipei and Taichung have already signed up. I don't doubt that Kaohsiung and the others will follow in time. It doesn't cost anything as far as I know, but I think importantly, it creates a unified platform for these cities and municipal areas to assist entrepreneurs in constructing solutions for domestic, local peoples. And then finally, the Asian Silicon Valley Initiative, which many of you might know is part of Tsai Ing-wen's 5+2, and that's really focused on innovation, R&D, creating a robust startup ecosystem with entrepreneurs, with access to funds, qualified employees, and modern facilities. We haven't heard as much about that of late, but nevertheless, it remains an important government policy. One concern I have, and then I'm going to stop. The one concern I have relates to Taiwan's connectivity with the rest of the world. Taiwan only has, as far as I'm aware, one undersea cable that connects it. One. It does some of its broadband through satellite, but that is an issue because the Chinese could do this very easily in a confrontation situation, and Taiwan would be cut off from its principal broadband connection. From my understanding, CHT, Zhonghua Telecom, whose responsibility it would be to lay another of these cables, believes that it's too expensive to lay more, but to me this is a national security issue. And it should be elevated out of the parochial interests of the company into a broader debate on how to ensure that Taiwan, in any situation, in all situations, can retain connectivity and the bandwidth it needs for peaceful evolution, and God forbid anything that comes in underneath that. Thank you all very much.
Rupert, thank you very much. Both of you, if I may, before I open it up to Q&A, I just want to kick off the discussions with my question, using my prerogative as moderator. Both of you have laid out very clearly some of the attractiveness of Taiwan for the United States, why the U.S. should deepen engagement economically with Taiwan. But if you were to distill your several pieces of argumentation, what would be the best way for Taiwan to make a case that the United States, at this point, should pay particular attention to Taiwan? Why it's so attractive? Because this administration, I think, it's all about, what is X country going to do for me, for the United States?
Yeah, I think, it plays back into this Indo-Pacific strategy that the Trump administration is pursuing, right? It's, again, as I said earlier, it's not just about, competing with China. It's about also, assuring your alliances, making new trade partners in the Indo-Pacific region. And I think as Rupert, very eloquently laid out, Taiwan is a big part of U.S. economic interests. If I could, just sort of, in addition, follow up to something he said, I knew he was going to bring up capital flow. So I did bring some of those in
Excellent.
numbers.
Let's go for it.
Bilateral investment across the straits has been decreasing. It's probably fallen by about 50%, at least Taiwanese investment in China over the last 10 years. But even if we look at just last year, so MOEA has the numbers for January through December this year, and if you compare them to just 2017, so the whole year last year, FDI in Latin America is down almost 50%. FDI in Australia is down 90%. FDI in the United States doubled. So they've already invested over 1.6 billion in the U.S. compared to just last year alone. So I think as Rupert was alluding to, there are companies and they're already strategically realigning their supply chains because of some of the risks that China presents.
Thank you.
If I were in charge, I would, these are going to be somewhat over political things, but I would certainly buy as much US energy as I possibly could. Taiwan is building new LNG terminals. I would expedite that process. Taiwan has energy problems anyway, that we need a whole nother panel, another hour to deal with that. So I would certainly be buying as much US energy as Taiwan possibly could. And the other thing I would point to is an issue that we followed closely, and it's related to the IC industry, the United States Trusted Foundry Program. For those of you who don't know what that is, Trusted Foundry Program is the program that the United States used for the procurement of classified chips for classified programs. We have some foundries here in the United States. They're mostly low-tech, low-end. Honeywell owns most of them. But there is a significant need for high-end investment at least the 300 millimeter 12-inch level here in the US to partner with the Department of Defense and other agencies in the production of classified chips. Taiwan would be a perfect strategic partner here in the US to handle that. Taiwan has a foundry in the Pacific Northwest, but my counsel would be something more ambitious, maybe the purchase of the Global Foundries foundry that's for sale in the Albany area of New York, and or a completely new build by a Taiwan business. So a couple of thoughts.
Okay, memo to the U.S. Let me open it up for Q&A, and if you don't mind, before you ask the question, just identify yourself. Someone up here?
Thank you very much. My name is Deng Huiyu, U.S. China Review News Agency of Hong Kong. My question is for Mr. Rupert. What do you think of the impact of the U.S.-China trade talks on the U.S. arms sales to Taiwan. I still remember in October you said it is possible there will be another round of on sale to Taiwan by the end of this year. But right now we have 90 days negotiation between US and China. What do you think of this kinds of opportunity?
Thank you.
Legal opportunity.
Thank you for what I hope will be the only arms sale question. But I don't think there's any issue. I don't think there's any impact at all. It is my view that we are now back to regular order for arms sales. If there's a sale, there's a sale. If there isn't, there isn't. It's not going to be impacted by US-China economic tensions. Thankfully, it shouldn't be either.
Leo Bosnia, retired federal employee. Question for Mr. Walters on the U.S. political support for Taiwan. It seems to me that historically the Republican Party has been the stronger supporter of Taiwan, at least for the last maybe 20 to 30 years or so. With the Democrats now controlling the House, what do you see as the attitude from the Democrat side? Will there be any changes? Do you think with the stuff going on in China, they'll be equally supportive in a bipartisan way, or what?
Yeah, it's difficult, especially since the new Congress hasn't even started yet. So there's feeling around in the dark a little bit on the future. I think, as you allude to, I think Congress is still very supportive of the U.S.-Taiwan relationship. I mean, last Congress they were very vocal about their support. Both sides, and I think that can continue on to next year. The U.S.-China relationship, this might be a little bit more difficult. Certainly Democrats have their own critiques of the U.S.-China relationship. And I think this is where Democrats and Republicans are either going to butt head or work together. Some issues they might, some issues they might agree upon, some issues they might disagree upon.
This side?
Dr. again. Dr. Malik, Senior Center. So I want to kick it up a step and ask a question more related to geopolitical aspects. The US-Taiwan relationship is generally seen within the prism of the One China policy in the relationship to maintain Sino-US relations. Now, I believe you probably would like a separation of that. What is the possibility of a separate relationship with Taiwan as an independent nation and recognized throughout the world? I mean, realistically speaking, given the trajectory of China in the forthcoming future as well, is it actually possible, or is the US-Taiwan relationship always going to be subset to the Sino or PRC-US relationship, forthcoming future, long term?
Who wants to?
Yes.
Gentlemen.
I'm going to say yes is my answer. It's Scotty, what a huge question. I subscribe to the notion that Taiwan or the Republic of China is already as a functioning state, right? Is already a functioning state, and as a practical matter, we already treat it as a country. Of course, there is nomenclature and a legal apparatus that we wrap around that makes it different. Treating Taiwan as a subset of China is a choice, and you can actually start to see within the US government some shifts in that, because it has served the US poorly in doing so, because quite reasonably, those people who are responsible for China treat China as the preeminent issue in any question they take. And if they're responsible for Taiwan, they will always defer to China. One of the things I hope we will see more of, and it's happened in one department, and I know it's happening in another, we'll see Taiwan be broken out of that dynamic within the US government, so that when Taiwan is considered as an issue, or an issue impacting US-Taiwan relations is considered, the person making that consideration at the Assistant Secretary level is not responsible for China. That person is at the Deputy Assistant Secretary level is not responsible for China. They're responsible for Taiwan and Southeast Asia, or Taiwan, Japan, and Korea, as opposed to Taiwan and China. It's a small answer. Do I foresee a future? Did you say a future?
When immediate, intermediate, long term, given the way that China's moving forward and rising, and given their increasing power.
Well, yeah, but that doesn't.
So the relationship with the US is it going to change? And if it does change, what are the challenges that you face?
But I think what I feel as if what you're inferring is that the only entity getting stronger is China, right? The US is getting stronger, Taiwan's getting stronger. It's not just China getting stronger and gets stronger and stronger and stronger and all of the rest of us falling further and further behind. So I think the ability of the United States to continue to project its interests as they relate to Taiwan is there and will remain. And I also think the reason for continuing to back Taiwan in the relationship actually is shifting away from a legacy parochial issue, as this gentleman pointed out, in respect to the relationship with the Republican Party, more towards what are the realities within the region at the moment? What would it mean to have Taiwan as part of the People's Republic of China from a strategic standpoint, from a military standpoint? What message would we be sending to the rest of the region if we said, we're going to let Taiwan go, the rest of you don't worry, that's not your fate? I think that would be a strategic disaster for the United States and its interests in the region. So it's a hard question to ask.
No, I agree with you.
Yeah, we could maybe have a whiskey
Could
or a
oppose it.
beer over it. really tuck into it, because I love it. Anyway, please,
Yes,
Wendy, go ahead.
question in the front. Oh, hang on, just Mike is coming.
Xia Cheng with United Day News Group Taiwan. So some U.S. officials and lawmakers claim that Huawei is a threat to U.S. national security. And as many Taiwanese people and companies use Huawei products, would Taiwan be a concern for the U.S.? And if that's the case, should Taiwan government ban the use of Huawei products? Thank you.
Okay. Which one of you takes that easy question?
We just trade off.
Yes.
Actually, I believe the government of Taiwan just recently banned the procurement of Huawei and CT as well, I think,
Yes,
in its
yes.
government procurements. I mean, the United States has long seen Huawei and CTE as national security threats. I mean, the complaints alleging to Ms. Meng's, the CFO of Huawei's arrest over the couple weekends ago, I mean, those were issued from at least a decade ago, continuing, I think it was in 2009 to 2013, and the implications that they had, obviously, those were for different national security reasons, but national security reasons nonetheless. While putting the Iranian sanction issues aside, there are still both espionage and cybersecurity concerns out there that not just the United States government, of course, has issues with, but other governments as well. And so, as we've seen over the past couple of months, and I think as we're going to see moving forward, there's going to be more of this hesitance and certainly restrictions on who can buy, at least from the government point of view, who can buy these types of technologies.
Any other thoughts? Okay.
Thanks. Russell Shell with the Global Taiwan Institute. Rupert, you left off with a very interesting idea, especially on the submarine cables, and I wanted to give you an opportunity to sort of build off on that a little bit more. I think you pointed out that there was one submarine cable that was sort of carrying.
That's my understanding, Russell, yeah.
That I believe there's 11 cables that are actually connecting to Taiwan, submarine cables connecting to 4 cable landing stations in Taiwan, but you may be referencing a specific type of submarine cable. But I certainly think that there is a ample room for cooperation between the United States and Taiwan in maintaining these critical infrastructure actually for the global internet, because of just how much financial flows as well as information that traverses through these submarine cables. And given Taiwan's strategic position in the midpoint of the first island chain and in the Western Pacific, I think people don't actually sort of appreciate that sort of geographic and strategic position of Taiwan. And so I wonder, and most of this is all privately managed. And so there's certainly a part where Taiwan can play a very important role, and I think should be doing more. Perhaps maybe you can address the part where you see there are other opportunities where the United States and Taiwan can work closer together with regards to the maintenance of these cables, because they often do get disrupted by this, a lot of fishing trawlers and inadvertently, but it can also be sabotaged too as well. And that would not only be disruptive for Taiwan, but it'd be disruptive for regional connectivity as well. So
I think, Russell, in this question that you're raising, and we'll get down into what cables do what, but there the one bit of this I'd like to point out, and this relates to the Trusted Foundry Program issue as well, is I would like to see, and perhaps it's taking place. I'm fully willing to have some U.S. government officials say, or Taiwan government officials say, no, we're already talking about it. I don't think so, though. That issues like this, or the Trusted Foundry Program, could be elevated maybe into Riley's high-level economic engagement talks, where there is a more significant push into looking at issues that transcend just parochial economic matters, but have strategic interests for both countries as well, where they sort of dovetail nicely with one another. This is obviously one of them, right? Connectivity to the outside world. What kind of plan does the Chinese have? Is it going to, from a commercial standpoint, is it enough? What needs to be done? Is it enough just to leave CHD to be in charge of it, or is this something that the president's office should be dealing with it itself, and that CHD should be directed or some other company to address these issues? I would welcome seeing an issue like that, or the Trusted Foundry Program, elevated into the higher level, so that the United States can potentially partner with Taiwan in these areas.
Okay, thank you. We've got like 1 minute, but you did have your hand up earlier, so I'm sorry about that. Please keep it short.
Okay, Tina Chung with Voice of America China branch. I just want one question about Canada. We're seeing reports showing interest to have a investment protection agreement with Taiwan. Can you just talk about it? Is this something new, or this is just been under the radar for a while? Thank you.
I heard about it, but I'm not sure.
Honestly, only what I read in probably you wrote. So I listen. I know what you're talking about. I saw it in my Taiwan papers as well, but I hadn't heard anything about that before this week. Candidly, I'm thrilled. Hopefully, the Chinese won't get to the Canadians in time so that something can be consummated, and that the Canadians can have the courage of their convictions to follow through on it. I would hope for that, but beyond that, I'm afraid I have no insight.
It's always good to end on an unanswered question because it keeps it open for further discussion. But I think we've had two excellent speakers, great tag team, so please join me in thanking them for their